Thanks, man. Appreciate it. All right. Do me a favor real quick while we're getting ready here. Welcome everybody who's joining in online and on demand. Thanks so much for joining in with us wherever you are. If you're on vacation or traveling or wherever you are this summer, we're glad that you stopped by here at our campus anytime you can. Always going on, always good things happening. But if you're having to travel, that you're catching us online or on our podcast or whatever you're on, thanks so much for doing that. And we are in a little summer series called The Way. And The Way is really about a powerful way of life that Jesus taught in a message that he gave called the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 through 7. So we're kind of in that passage all this summer, Matthew 5 through 7. So if you're with us and you're going to follow along, you can do that. I would highly recommend you add those 3 chapters to your summer reading. Now, this week we're finishing the first chapter with a little bit of an eye-opening subject. In fact, I'm going to say it one more time, if you have some kids in the room, now's a great time to take them to those kids' environments if they haven't been, or you're going to have what we call an awkward ride home. So, but that's up to you, your call, man, okay? So, because Jesus this week is talking about lust, okay? Now, lust is a very familiar subject to all of us. We're familiar with what this is, what it's about. But as he tends to do, and he's already done so many times in this series, Jesus is going to talk about a familiar subject in a very, very unexpected way. So now we're about ready to look at our main passage and talk about it. I'm going to give you a warning. It's a tough one, okay? This is one of those that you read, and it kind of makes you go, oh, well, this is a really tough passage. But sometimes, some weeks, you got to talk through this kind of stuff and really process it and see what's there. So let's look at Matthew 5:27. And this is continuing in Jesus' message. He says, "You've heard the commandment that says, you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell," right? Woo, right? This is not one you want to read before wedding vows or anything like that, right? Or just kind of gather around, kids. Come on around. It's time for Bible time. And then you read this one, and everyone's like, what? This is an interesting thing that he's doing, too. He does something very similar to last week. So last week, Jesus was saying, you've heard, don't murder. And everyone agreed. And he says, but I say, if you're angry with someone, and then he does this kind of surprising teaching, and he does the very same thing here. He kind of continues his pattern. He says, you've heard, don't commit adultery, and everyone agrees, like, yeah, adultery is probably not a good idea, right? But I say, if you've lusted after someone, you've already committed adultery in your heart. And once again, as they did last week, the crowd went, I was with you on the first part, but Jesus, you keep changing lanes on me, and then you get into this other stuff that I'm not quite sure what you're saying. And while everyone's nice and uncomfortable, Jesus goes ahead and just kind of ups the ante by saying, by the way, if your eye causes you to lust, gouge it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. And people had to be looking around then thinking, what is he saying? And we today wonder, what does he mean? Now, honestly, we obviously didn't take this literally, right? Because it would look like Pirates of the Caribbean in here, right? You know what I'm saying? Like we'd all be like, yep, we all did it, kind of a thing. And it would just look different, right? In fact, I did student ministry for a long time. If you want to if you go to youth camp, you don't have to scare teens by telling a ghost story by the fire. Just get a bunch of teen boys together, read this passage, and then close the book really loud, and they'll just jump right out of their skin. And if you really want to scare them, be like, no, who here needs to be the next Captain Hook? And some of them will just pass out right there, like, oh, I can't, I can't take it anymore, right? It's just one of those passages, it's scary, right? Now, kidding aside, what does this actually mean? Well, what does this have to do with us today? What was Jesus saying? Now, first of all, we got to to really get into this, we need to understand what are we saying when we say lust, okay? What is lust and what isn't lust? For example, the dictionary just says lust is Strong sexual desire. Okay. Well, thanks, Webster's. That's super helpful. We knew that. But the problem with lust is we confuse it with other things. We confuse it with attraction. We confuse it with love. For example, I asked the question, is there a difference between attraction and lust? Right? Yes. Some of you weren't sure. And you're like, I hope he says yes, because if not, then, whatever, pop it out, right? So here's the thing. Attraction is noticing someone, okay? Lust is imagining a sexual experience with them. Some are like, well, that was blunt, Matt. You could have said it a little gentler, okay? So, but I'm just being honest. Noticing someone's beautiful, that's not Jesus' it's saying like that's going to happen, okay? It's what you do with what happens when you notice it. That's the difference, right? And for some of you who didn't know there was a difference, someone's glad you're here today, right? Because there is a difference between, oh, she's pretty, and then humana, whatever, and then like the cartoon wolf eyes and whatever, all that stuff, and the tongue hanging out. Like I'm not saying that we do that, but there is a difference between what do we do when we notice attraction. That's where lust kind of kicks in. Now, in a relationship, though, lust takes different forms. Because we tend to think of lust as an outside of my relationship thing, like someone walks by, or it's directed at other people. But lust can very much be directed at the one that you're with. And this is the difference between love and lust. Big difference, right? Because love is supposed to be a transforming experience for both people, where you both grow, and you both grow alongside each other. Lust, however, takes any relationship or any marriage and makes it transactional. I'm going to do this just to make you happy, and you do this just to make me happy, but weirdly, we're both not happy. But we're making transactions toward happiness, right? In other words, let me define it this way. Love is losing yourself in someone else. Lust is using someone to love yourself, right? Here's a fight that's going to happen later, right? And this is a tough one, right? I mean, love is very focused on what I can give someone else. That's what love is. I want to give toward this other person. Lust is focused on what I can get from them. And lust will take any relationship, any marriage, and make it basically an exchange of goods. That we are just transacting. We're just making an exchange here. I assume you're happy. You assume I'm happy, but we're both not happy, right? And that's not good for any relationship. Now, if I can talk candidly about this, something that really messed me up early in my marriage was Christian marriage books, okay? And I'm not saying they're all bad, only like 99%, okay? So like, there's 1% that I'm kidding. But I will say, I grew up in Nashville. That's the accent if you're new. In Nashville, which is the mecca of Christian publishing. And the one thing you learn living in Nashville is like really anyone can write a book. I mean, anyone can write a book. And there's a lot of, there's some good books out there for sure, but you got to dig through a lot of not so good ones. And what I think the problem is with a lot of the marriage books I read was they had really good intentions. I believe that, but they had bad ideas. And let me kind of walk through one of those. Like one of the themes of a lot of the books about Christian marriage or Christian sexuality or Christian this is for guys, for example, they encourage you on one end not to seek affairs or to seek out porn, right? Which, that's good, okay? Like, yeah, those are not good things. But then on the other end, they say, so what do you do with all that sexual desire? Well, here's what you do. You aim all of it at your spouse, okay? Like a grenade launcher. You just put them in the crosshairs and just shoot and just like aim at, use her to fulfill every weird thing ever. Like just that's what God intended. And then here's the fun part. Wives, if we're talking about men that way, then they say, and wives, if you don't give him everything he wants and become every flavor of ice cream that he's ever wanted, then he might have an affair. And guess whose fault that will be? Yours. Now, can you tell men wrote these books, okay? Because somehow the men have no responsibility at all, but the woman has to carry the whole thing. I mean, it's like, hey, ladies, you need to be Martha Stewart at home and Marilyn Monroe in the bedroom, and men just be you just be you, dog. Like, no one's telling me to make money like Bill Gates or look like Tom Cruise, right? But for some reason, the expectation's super high over here, crazy low over here, right? And the problem with the books is this. There's no encouraging men to get their desires in check. No, just run around, run free, run like a horse in a field, just woo, just go crazy, and like just whatever you want, right? And the problem is, you're using your spouse to fulfill them. So the solution is this: men, we don't want you to objectify women. So the answer to that is to objectify your wife. And you have to read a few of these and kind of go, wait a minute, like that doesn't sound right. Using my spouse in this way, that doesn't sound like loving someone. Ding, 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 right? It's not. It's basically lust with permission. Like, right? It's basically like, use them, but just do it with Jesus by your side or whatever. And it's kind of that thing, like, we're just going to give you permission to do these things that are still bad things and still hurt marriages and still drive, divorce through the roof, right? So, in other words, lust, if you look at it, it's kind of, another way to define it would be imagining taking or actually taking. But the main thing is it's taking from someone. And by the way, I know I've kind of been hard on the men, so lust affects men, women, everyone, okay? This is an all everybody on the floor, everybody moving around. Don't pretend like, I have never looked at anyone. Okay, drop it, okay, all right, that's enough, Everyone struggles in some kind of way, and everyone has to be honest about this. Is there any lust in your life? Is there any objectification happening in your life? Is there taking going on in your life? Are there transactional relationships in your life? And that's the questions that Jesus is kind of asking us to kind of come to around this subject. And here's the challenge for all of us, okay? Here's the main thing, the main challenge when it comes to how we do all this regarding sex. Here it is, 1 Thessalonians 4:3 says this: God's will, his desire, right, is for you to be holy, so stay away from all sexual sin. And then each of you will control his own body and live in holiness and honor, not in lustful passion like the pagans who don't know God and his ways. Now, Paul wasn't trying to be offensive by saying pagans. He's saying literally like people don't know God, okay? So, but I want you to think about this. And we really need to think about what this is saying, because this really actually sets the table for the whole, gouge out your eye, cut off your hand conversation we're about to have, right? But this is what this passage is saying. God's desire for each one of us is to be different. That's what holy means, different from the others, right? Set apart from the rest. That's what holy means, right? By staying away from being sexually out of control. Do whatever you can to not be sexually out of control. Each of you should control your body and live with honor, or to live honorably. Now, here's why the kids are not in the room. Let me give you a little inside baseball on this word body, because all our English versions kind of wuss out and don't translate this what it is. And that's okay. But the word translated body is actually a word called skios in the Greek, which means instrument or vessel. So in other words, regarding sex, keep your instrument in check. I don't think it means tuning your guitar, okay? I'm just saying, I think it's pretty clear what they're talking about here. I mean, literally, the Bible's telling us, control your body parts in an honorable way. I mean, right there you see it, right? But the other thing it says is there's a big difference between two ways of how we go about this, how you go about the issue of sex. There's a way of honor and a way of reckless passion. And kind of whatever I'm feeling, I'm doing, right? And Paul says that, people who don't know God typically will follow desire, because desire is a big motivator. Desire is a big mover if you're not really in a spiritual, life or any of that. But he says you don't have to live that way. You have another option. And the option is this, is you can love someone and honor them. You can date someone and honor them. You can be married to someone and honor them. You can respect them and not use them to love yourself. And that's God's desire for us, and he wants to help us live out that way, because he knows for us, the way of honor is not really intuitive. We're going to tend to just be selfish people because we kind of are selfish people, and that's kind of the way we are, right? But to think of this in a different way is going to take God kind of coming in and helping us in a little bit of looking at this differently. But what Jesus is saying with the whole, take out your eye if it's causing you to sin, gouge it out, right? Cut off your hand. What is he saying? Anything getting in the way of honoring the other person, or anything fueling the fire that's making you take from another person, cut it off. Now again, he's not being literal about eyes and hands here because again, look around you, right? He's obviously using a metaphor, but for what? Like, what does he really mean by this? If you simplify what Jesus is saying, it's really this: cut off the source. What's the source? The stirring up things in you, like wrong desires in you. What's causing you to struggle? What is that you keep going back to the root of the problem? Find it and eliminate it. And what Jesus is saying by this whole eye-hand situation is it's better for one thing to be cut out of your life than for your life to fall into the consequences of recklessness. Now, think about it this way. If you, do we have any electricians here at all? Anybody who's an electrician? I'm not asking for work. I'm just saying, show you. Okay, good. Some of you are like, I'm not doing anything for you. Okay, good. Okay, so there's a couple electricians here, so they'll know the answer to this. If you find bad wiring in your house, okay, just wires hanging out, whatever, here's the deal. You got to fix that or somebody's going to get electrocuted, right? But before you go and try to fix the wires, what's the one thing you need to do first? Yeah. Turn off the power, right? Because if you try to fix the wires without turning off the power, you're electrocuted anyway, okay? When you notice bad wiring, you cannot fix it until you cut off the power source. And in the same way, when you notice bad wiring in your heart and in your mind and something's not right, and my cravings are moving over here and my desires are moving over here and I'm not sure what's going on, the first thing you have to do is think about this. You can't fix any of that without turning off what's fueling it, the power source. Turn off what's empowering it and what's fueling that fire. This is why there's passages like Proverbs 4:23, right, that says this: guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Now, some of you grew up in youth group and you heard this verse, and someone would teach on this verse and then tell you how to date like an Amish person, right? And basically say, if you sit next to them, then the Lord is looking at you, whatever, and you're like scared to death to even be around anyone. And maybe you didn't grow up that way. Maybe I just have a unique experience. I don't know. Anyway, but here's the thing. But a lot of times when you hear this verse or you hear this thing, like, it really does make an important point. And that important point is this: is desires move us in directions. Guard your heart, guard your desires, because they determine the course of your life. Here, you know this already, because, for example, you desire a certain career, you're going to pursue that career. You desire to marry this person, you're going to marry this person. Typically, no one can really make you go in a direction in your life where you have no desire to go there at all. You typically move toward what you desire, what you want to do, and desires move us in directions. And what Jesus is simply saying is, out of control desires will move you in out of control directions. You can't hold all that stuff in and keep it a big secret, and it doesn't affect your relationships, and it doesn't affect your marriage, and it's just, well, if I just have, this is just me, and this, no, it is never going to be just you, right? We do things we never imagined, and we understand, like, how did that happen? Because desire moves me in a direction. How did I get addicted to this? Because desire is moving me in a direction. How in the world am I drawn to this now, or even thinking about this? Because desire moves us in directions. And Jesus is just saying to us, this is the hard part. Be honest about what your eye's seeing, what your hand is doing. Be honest about what's stirring up the wrong stuff. What's stirring desires in you? What is it? Because none of us, you don't want to know about all of us, no one set out to hurt anyone in a relationship. No one sets out to take from anyone. No one sets out to dishonor someone that they love. No one does. But not many of us make the necessary cuts to actually prevent that from happening. We're trying to have our cake and eat it too, and you can't, because one collides into the other. And this is why Paul said to us in 1 Corinthians 6:12. He says to us, you say, I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. Now, this is just wisdom here, thinking about this, because here's what we typically do. We kind of excuse and rationalize all the things we like to kind of hold on to, right? But the question is, are we being honest about what's good for us, right? So think about this. Here's what we typically do when something's kind of bothering us or kind of in this motion, right? We have this thing, I don't want to let go of it, but we tend to say, it's not wrong, okay? It's not wrong to do this, right? It's not wrong. But here's the question we have to ask. Is it wise? That's a whole different question. It's not whether or not this is right or wrong, because not many of the things, again, there maybe is some right or wrong that plays into this, but a lot of things that we typically do that are not good for us are typically not wrong, but they're not wise for us. All of us have weaknesses. And here's the challenge. Certain things affect us in certain ways. Like, for example, porn is not good for anybody. I don't know if you knew this. And there's a lot of people, be honest with you, I have never been to any kind of marriage event or marriage counseling or anything where someone told me, you know what really brought us together and saved our marriage? Porn. Boy, that was the missing key. We were missing the whole thing. We were having trouble communicating. We weren't getting along, but man, we brought porn in and woo! Everything changed. We got 8 kids now. We're just living it, right? Porn. That would be, it doesn't happen, right? It was so funny to me is science is just now catching up to the Bible on this. They're just now coming out with scientific studies going, I think this hurts people's marriages. Oh, really? That's amazing. What amazing data that we found that we've known for thousands of years already, right? It is crazy to me that people are just catching up on this, but here's the challenge. Is that stirring up expectations that your spouse cannot meet? Because if you want fantasy, reality will suffer. It does. Now, let me just not pick on that. Let's say you like to watch these idealistic movies where the man is just so thoughtful and he meets every emotional need and he's so perfect. And you are so disgusted with the slob that you are sitting with. Why can't you be more like Hans? Yes, he's a prince from another country and he's here in this small village, but Hans acts like a woman. Why can't you just act like a woman and be different and be completely, whatever? This also sets up expectations that no one meets, period, right? No one. And again, the challenge is, if you want fantasy, reality will suffer. Maybe that coworker is the only one that gets you and the only one that understands you. And you're starting to think the grass might be greener on the other side. Have you noticed that when you jump that, people who've jumped that fence tend not to stay in that fence? They jump fences a couple of times. Why is that? Because I don't want reality. I want something else that reality cannot meet. And what's going to happen to me? Let me tell you something. If you are stirring up desires that are not based in a reality that you live in because you want another reality, don't say it's the other person's problem. It's your problem. It's my problem. It's a heart problem. It's me. I've got everything stirred up. I can't live in the world I live in. So I've got to go find these fixes and these temporary things to make me feel like I'm somewhere else because I don't know how to deal with reality. And the thing is, when you notice bad wiring, you really can't fix it until you turn off the power source. You can't engage this and change this until you just cut the stuff off. And this is where Jesus is saying to them, which was so controversial, look into your heart. Okay, so you're not having an actual affair, but do you think if you're imagining having affairs regularly that's not going to affect your marriage? Are you kidding? How much fantasy can you have until it just absolutely starts to cave in and invade reality? Because reality will suffer under that weight. And this is what Jesus is saying. When you see the source that is stirring you and you identify what that is, take it seriously. Don't make excuses. Don't rationalize it. Just shut it down, because it may not be wrong, or it may not be, well, so-and-so can watch it, or so-and-so could do it. But for me, it's not wise. For me, it's just not wise. Don't destroy reality for fantasy. Kill the source. Talk to a friend about it. Talk to your partner about it. Go to counseling, because in all essence, if you really want to define lust in all of its forms, it really kind of more looks like this. Lust is craving what you don't have in a way that hurts what you do have. That's the problem. It just gets me so set on things that are not real. And because I can't deal with what's in front of me. Now, here's some encouragement. I know some of you are like, ugh, please give me some encouragement, because good Lord, right? 2 Timothy 1:7 says this: "For God's not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." Can I tell you something? You don't have to be afraid or intimidated when desires are out of control. When you find bad wiring, you don't have to be afraid about that. You don't have to be, listen, the presence of God in you, His Spirit, gives us what we need, gives us power, love, and self-discipline. What does that look like? Power to make hard decisions. That's one thing that takes a lot of power. Make hard calls and go, you know what, that may be for them, but that's not for me. That stirs up stuff in me. I don't need it. Love stirs up the good, healthy stuff, the good, healthy desires, the good desires that you want in there. Love is what refreshes all that and gets those contaminants kind of out of there, like genuinely loving, genuinely going back to, it's not about me getting, it's about me giving. And self-discipline, that no one likes, right? No one likes self-discipline. It's an extremely unpopular topic, right? And all the self-discipline is just making the cuts that need to be made. We do this all the time. Like if it's just like your body. Sometimes you got a health issue. You got to cut stuff out. It is part of life. It's not fun. And I would say that if you would cut something out because you have a health problem, I would also argue that you can't really be relationally healthy, sexually healthy, emotionally healthy without cutting out the things that stir up the wrong things in us. Absolutely. This thing's stirring up the wrong stuff. I got to cut this out. This isn't going to lead me anywhere. It's saying to yourself this: I will not use someone to love myself. That's not what I'm going to do. I will not get my heart set on fantasy. I will give myself to someone else, because I want my reality to grow and thrive. I want my marriage or whatever to be strong. I want these things to grow and thrive. I don't want to run away from reality. I want reality better. I want reality to be more powerful, more hopeful. And any desires that try to shift me off that direction have to go. I'm going to figure out where it's coming from, and I'm going to eliminate it. And here's what I would encourage you to do. If you need help, get help. Okay? Now, for some of you are like, well, if you go to a marriage counselor, that's like saying you're done. And listen, I go to a counselor. A lot of people in this room go to a counselor. You should go to one, especially if it's amazing the adventure we will take to get our needs met, but the little things we won't do to save our marriage. Right? I mean, men are driving out of town into shady parts of whatever to just, meet the wrong desire, but somehow can't walk in a counselor's office. Like, oh no, that would be. Really? Do what it takes to get the help that you need. Think about the message you're sending. How much do you love your spouse? How much do you love your children? How much do you love your family? Just do the right thing. Yeah, it's going to not be fun. Yeah, there's going to be some hard things you're going to have to go through, but can I tell you something? God will walk you through that whole journey. He's not going to leave your side. If you need prayer, pray with someone before you leave today. If you're watching online, shoot us an email and say, hey, listen, I need somebody on staff praying for me. And let us know, info@santacruzbible.org, whatever it is. But if you're here on our campus and you just need prayer, just pray with someone before you leave. There's no embarrassment in this. The reason why we're talking about it is because we all struggle with this, right, in some sort of way. I'll never will forget a talk I did. This is improv, by the way, so this is off the script, so this may go horribly wrong. But one time I started a talk, and I don't know why I did this. This is, again, I was young, dumb, and broke, and here's something I did. I just said, hey, just I wanted to show how uncomfortable the subject was. I said, how many of you in this room just struggle with pornography? Show of hands. And I knew no one would stick their hand up. But these two guys in the front row that couldn't see everybody behind them were like, oh, like it shot them up, right? And they just held their hands up there. And these were married guys too. And they're just like, yep, we absolutely, that's us, man. And then all of a sudden their wives are looking around and they're like, get your hand down right now. And they shot them back down. And my point was, it's so weird that everyone's so interested in this subject, but no one struggles with it, man. And weird, right? And that was kind of my joke until those two guys got embarrassed, and I was kind of like, okay, don't do that again. But everyone has struggled in this area. Everyone has tried to navigate the whole God-sex conversation in their own life. And it's a complicated conversation. We try to make it simpler than it is, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of pain from the past, and a lot of hurt, and a lot of desires, and a lot of stuff playing into how I can be intimate with anybody. A lot to play. But I want to say, if you need God to show you something, ask him to show you. Here's one thing we know from Scripture. James 1:5 says this. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he'll give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. God is always saying, listen, if you don't know what step to take, you come to me, I'll tell you. I will tell you. I'm ready and willing to tell you. I'm ready and willing to help you. I never will forget this man that went to Jesus one time, and he said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And how did Jesus respond? I'm willing. That's the whole idea. We come to Jesus and say, oh, if you're willing, you can clean all this up. And Jesus is like, oh, I'm willing. I can clean everything up like that, but I want to move you on a journey. I got to take you through some things. Or you're going to keep coming back to dirty wells to drink. And you're not going to know what you actually need, but I need to take you on that journey. And the question is, are you willing to take that step? So many people keep this stuff secret, private, and kind of block it in, right? And I'm like, look, the more it's like that, the worse it's going to get. It's like trying to hide an infection and being like, nope, nothing to see here. It's not bleeding. That's you bleeding. That's not me bleeding, right? No. And there's some infections inside of us that we're going to have the courage to face down and say, I can't have this wreck my marriage. I cannot have this working in me and making me constantly unsatisfied with my life. I can't have it. And guys, the world's not going to get any easier on this kind of stuff with all the robots and AI and all the mess. Talk about how fantasies, what direction all that's going to go. It's going to be really fun leading the church in the next 50 years, right? But all I got to say is the principle's still the same. Reality pays the price. And at some point you have to look across from that person, remember why you fell in love with them in the first place, and say, like, I don't want this to burn because I'm unwilling to face my own stuff. Please remember, God is ready and willing to walk with you on this journey. And once fantasy is not driving cravings and starts to kind of starve and wither away, do you know what happens? Reality actually gets better. Reality becomes more hopeful. Reality becomes more powerful. Healthy relationships become more and more possible because now this thing is out of play. Hope for what can be and where God wants to move it is more powerful. And the power and the love of Jesus doesn't just become something that you're aware of. It becomes something deep, deep inside, even the darkest corners of our hearts. And it becomes a way of life. And how I see myself changes. And how I see others change. And I live out of love and not lust. There is a way. And Jesus gives us that way. Let's pray. Father, we just come to you in this really awkward talk. And I know this is an uncomfortable subject, but we also know that there's these passages sometimes, Lord, we just want to walk through them, help people understand, like, what is it actually saying, what is it not saying? How do we walk in that today? And Lord, I pray that you answer that question for every person who's listening. Help them see a step. Help them to first be honest about their own struggle. to be honest about, am I objectifying this person? Am I stirring up desires that don't need to be there? What am I doing? And Father, help us to see the sources and cut them. We see the wisdom of your scripture that it's better for one thing not to be there than for everything to fall apart. And so, Lord, help us to make hard calls, but help us to gather people around us. Help us to bring people close to us, community close to us, friends close to us. Help us to have that conversation in our marriage, anywhere we need to open up and just say, hey, listen, I got to work through some things. God, thank you that you're ready and willing to go on a journey with all of us. And at the end of that journey, we're healthier, we're better, we're more hopeful. We don't have to go drink out of dirty wells anymore. We don't have to go to these things. We don't have to use these kind of things because I know how to thrive in my own reality. I know how to grow and to be different and to be set apart in the world that I live in. I don't want to be out of control anymore. And Jesus, for every person that takes the risk to reach across and to take you by the hand and say, I want the help, I need the help, I pray that you will bless them and open up a whole new world of peace, contentment, love, and all the fruits of the Spirit that we talk about so often. Help us to see that your love really is the way. And help us to look at our desires and to not just be a slave to passion, but to take control of our minds, of our bodies, and today to say, enough. Help us to walk in you. Give us that pathway, Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.